Hello and welcome back to the AI in Business podcast brought to you by Raw Media. I'm Chris and joining me as always is my co-host Nick Hodder. Nick, welcome back.
Hey Chris, good to be here. Little bit sad after last night. Some context. It is the Thursday morning after the Wednesday night that England have been knocked out of the World Cup. So yeah, I think we went a little bit too defensive, a little bit too early. And maybe that's a lesson we can take into AI as well.
Yeah, indeed. Hopefully you enjoyed last week's episode where we covered everything from AI agents and enterprise deployment, ransomware. And this week, as promised, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the people side of enterprise AI, because businesses can buy the tools, build the strategy and announce the transformation, but ultimately people still have to trust it, understand it and work with it. But before we get into the stories, Nick, what have you been up to this week? Anything interesting?
Yeah, so loads of really interesting conversations with people this week about AI policy and governance and maybe what that can fix and maybe what it can't. And I think we touched on some of that last week, but I imagine it'll come up time and time again, perhaps today as well.
We've kept alluding to it, but do you think organizations are talking enough about the people side when we're talking about AI in business?
Frankly, no. I think most conversations start out with using AI for productivity and automating processes. I think there are a couple of issues with that. One is from a practical sense, I think you need to zoom out a bit more when you think about your kind of use of AI, and that there's a real opportunity for you to replace, sort of 10 processes with AI, not automate 10 processes with AI. That's one thing. And then on the people side, we keep coming back to this. The landscape and the culture in which you deploy AI will determine its success. And if you are not addressing cultural issues, the different perspectives of the people in your organization, then you're going to have the same issues that we've traditionally had with all digital transformations, which is that adoption and buy-in is the thing that often sinks it.
That's right. And I think through my experience of running the Digital Transformation Conference series, the AI in Business series, I think we're hearing the same challenges from organizations from a people perspective, particularly around adoption of tools and technologies and emerging technologies within the business, not just AI. We're always kind of hearing the same sentiment each time, around a resistance to change and things like that. So I think it's one of those areas that often businesses kind of skirt around the issues just because it's, one of the hardest things around any level of transformation. So I think the more businesses talk about it, address it and really tackle it head on, I think that's the kind of the critical thing.
Absolutely.
First story of this week, and it's going to be Meta again back in the news. And I think we touched on it last week around their issues, perhaps around culture. This time round, I picked up a story around some Meta employees who are suing over some alleged AI-assisted layoffs, which is frightening, really. A group of 26 Meta employees apparently filed a lawsuit claiming that the company used AI systems and algorithm-assisted performance measures as part of its recent layoff process. The employees allege that these systems disproportionately affected people who had taken protected medical, parental, or family leave. And it's not just Meta. I've seen a few stories around this and a few suspicions around the use of AI with regards to this. And I think the argument is that if a system measures things like activity output or AI tool usage, someone who is legitimately away from work may naturally receive a lower score, even though the absence is legally protected. So it's a bit of a scary story on that one.
Chris, does it say how they picked them?
So apparently it was those who had taken protected medical, parental, or family leave.
Right. So it's people who've sort of obviously got big things happening in their lives, understandably might be distracted.
Yeah.
So let's get this straight. So basically, Chris, Meta built an AI to decide who to lay off, and apparently it decided that the people most likely to be distracted and emotionally vulnerable made the best targets, allegedly. I mean, I say that. I think it's unlikely Meta are going to sponsor our podcast anytime soon, but it doesn't sound great, does it?
No, not at all. And I think it's that the age-old discussion around human decision or AI decision. And I think this is one of those, real sensitive areas where this, a robot, an AI can not be making these decisions whatsoever.
I think last week I sort of alluded to the fact that Meta have a culture problem.
Yes.
This is really interesting because we hadn't really ever, until the last few years, thought about these giant technology companies as having a culture problem. In fact, quite the opposite. Yeah. It sounded like there were great places to work. You could have unlimited free snacks and free meals in the many free cafes and play table tennis and FIFA in your lunch break. It all sounded really nice, but that's not really culture. Culture is wanting to work for your organization, feeling passionate about it. Do you think that there's a real shift in culture at these technology companies, probably from the leadership down, that I think we weren't expecting before? And do you think that will result in people actually giving up the very large amounts of money that they might get for those roles and move into roles where they're just happier?
Yeah, I think so. I think tech companies have, going back 10 years or so, like you're saying, they looked so attractive to be a part of. And now with kind of the advent of technology in the workplace, it's creating a bit more kind of sinister approach within the organization. And I think employees are looking at this and perhaps a little bit scared of kind of what's happening. And I think if they're looking at workplace AI being used by leadership to watch, rank, or, even quietly judge them, they may resist using the technology themselves, avoid taking legitimate leave, which could have an impact on various elements of their own health, ultimately lose trust in leadership. It creates the opposite of that open, experimental culture businesses need for efficiency in business and also for a responsible AI adoption. I think it opens a can of worms in a sense.
Do you think this is a forerunner to what other enterprises are going to run into, which is obviously these tech companies are also the early adopters of AI as well as the creators of AI. Do you think that for enterprises, this is what's coming their way? If they are going to use AI, they are going to have to understand the impact that has on their culture and maybe do it with a lot more care. And perhaps this is a lesson we can take from Meta.
Definitely, I think it's a perfect case study for those organizations that are implementing workplace AI to take a deeper look at. And I think it just comes back to responsibility, really. Leadership needs to nurture their workforce as well as, keeping them competitive and, efficient as possible. And I think looking at things like Meta, who are, the market leader when it comes to, technology output, both internally and externally, just needs to be closely looked at when decisions are made at, a high level across different industries and sectors. We can't totally rely on AI. I think that the tying of the human AI element is just the most critical thing, and getting the balance right, I think, is going to be the hardest thing for organizations moving forward. So I think business takeaway on this one is that businesses need extremely strong safeguards where AI is involved in decisions about people, which means clear ownership, transparent criteria, human review with genuine authority, bias and impact testing, and we haven't touched on the bias element too much, but an appeal process perhaps as well, and adjustments for leave, disability, and different working patterns. The lesson here is that AI in HR isn't just a technology question, clearly. It's a fairness, trust, and culture question.
Yeah, I don't think it's a really good point about looking after your people is a good business decision. This isn't a thing that you should be trying to get away with, that you should be skirting the edges of legislation with. You should be looking after your people because your people are going to be really important. Their motivation will be really important, and that will be good for your business.
Indeed. And the second story today offers a slightly more constructive view of how businesses can respond to AI. So the UK's new Financial Services Skills Compact, which was announced this week, brings together major organisations including Barclays, HSBC, Lloyds, NatWest, Nationwide, and the LSE, other firms are committing to upskilling their UK workforces in AI. So they're upskilling the UK workforces in AI and other critical skills over a rolling 3-year period. They must also maintain roots into the sector for new talent, appoint a senior executive responsible for closing skills gaps, and publish annual progress updates. I think this is very positive news, Nick. It's acknowledging that AI transformation can't simply mean buying technology and telling people to keep up. If companies expect employees to work differently, they have a responsibility to give them the time, skills, and support to do that. I think the important question here will be whether this becomes meaningful workforce development or simply another collection of online learning modules that everyone clicks through while answering emails.
I don't think it's a box ticking exercise, and I understand the intent. Whether it will have the results they're expecting, I don't know. The Chancellor wants financial services firms to retrain thousands of workers in AI, but these are the same firms that have been automating financial jobs since the 80s. To be fair, they're trying to automate away jobs using blockchain and stablecoin legislation. They will try to automate jobs using AI, and they're there to make a profit. I mean, famously, they quite like making a large profit. So asking them to now protect workers from AI is a bit like asking the fox to chair the hen house's security committee. I think they're open to it. But this is the sector that invented algorithmic trading and automated sort of back offices and eliminated entire job categories, without being asked. I mean, they're quite keen on that. So now they've been asked to probably do some workshops. And I just don't know if that'll sort it out. I don't know what it looks like, what the skilling up looks like. As we constantly talk about, your problem in your organization is almost certainly not a lack of skills. It's a lack of motivation to acquire new skills. So the point to address is motivation, not skills. People acquire skills because they're highly motivated to do it. So where's the motivation?
Exactly. I mean, they should probably just attend the AI in Business conference, right?
Absolutely. It's very reasonably priced.
And I think on this as well, completing an AI awareness course doesn't mean someone's going to be AI capable. They have to be, like you said, motivated to do it. But I think it has to be relevant to the person's role. I think they need to look at this a bit more individually to people rather than being, a blanket course. It needs to be connected to real workflows, supported by managers, and also safe to experiment with. I think the idea is to keep the talent pipeline alive here. The commitment to maintain roots for new talent is especially important. And it goes back as well to that entry-level role that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. You don't want to damage future leadership and skills pipelines. So I think there needs to be some accountability here. And I think a good question to ask here is reskilling now the real test of whether companies are serious about responsible AI or rather than simple serious about reducing costs?
Yeah.
Nick, just on that one as well, what do you think genuinely useful AI training looks like? You've mentioned workshops.
I talked about motivation. So I'm not saying you don't have workshops, but your workshops, I don't think they should focus on prompt engineering or teaching your teams how to use kind of agentic AI. They should be about exploring real problems that your organization has and then coaching them through how you might apply AI to solve those problems. And then those people go away with not just an ability to use AI, but an understanding of how AI can solve a real problem for them, which is then motivation and also the skills to apply to that.
Nice. And our third story this week comes from Indeed's hiring lab. It's found that AI is increasingly appearing in job titles outside of traditional technology roles. And we're now seeing AI-labeled roles across areas including sales, HR, customer service, legal services, administration, teaching, and even skilled trades. In the UK, more than half of the job title categories touched by AI were outside traditional technology occupations. Not a story about companies hiring more machine learning engineers. It's about AI beginning to change the language and expectations attached to kind of, normal jobs. I think this is probably more realistic picture of the future of work than the idea that everyone will, become an AI engineer or be replaced by one. Most jobs won't become completely new AI jobs. Existing jobs will simply gain an AI component. I think domain knowledge still clearly matters. Did you see anything around this?
Yeah, I did. My kind of overriding thought was that I think because we're in the midst of this, it's a bit confusing. But I think where we end up is it's going to be like saying non-tech jobs need email skills. I mean, yes, they do. So I think the chart that we've seen basically shows that if you want a job in almost any field, being comfortable with AI, if it's not now, it will be table stakes, which means people saying, I don't really do technology, which shockingly, I've even had people in digital jobs say to me, so I don't really know about technology, or I'm not that interested in technology, which fair enough. But I think the truth is that you have to be interested in the things that will help you achieve the outcomes you want to achieve. And frequently the answer to that problem is AI. And frequently the expectation from your employer will be that you know that the answer to that problem is AI. It comes back to that culture issue. Are people on board with the idea of AI? Are you building it into your culture and your training? And are you giving people the resources they need? It's all very well sticking AI in the job title, but it has to go wider than that.
Yeah, and I think going back to kind of job specs, 10, 20 years ago, where you had to be kind of proficient in Microsoft Excel or Outlook, I think moving forward, I think we're going to see AI literacy becoming, as basic as that once was. So I think AI literacy moving forward is it's going to be expected from a lot of the workforce.
Prompting skills, I don't think I would use those words or frame it in that way. They need to be able to explain concepts clearly, which is a thing that it's a thing that they should have already been able to do, but that's going to become the critical skill.
So I think the big takeaway on that one is the future probably isn't every job becoming an AI job, rather every job gaining an AI layer. Now on to our bad robot, and Nick is taking the reins on this one. So what have you got in store for us this week, Nick?
People are worried about AGI achieving godlike powers, but AI isn't the messiah. He's just a very naughty boy. So this time, the naughty boy has appeared in the Crown Prosecution Service, where they cited 2 legal cases in the High Court. Fine, that's their job. But both cases were entirely fictional. So the good news is that AI is contributing to British legal history. The bad news is that the cases it's contributing don't actually exist. Apparently, when they went back and questioned the AI, it did apologise twice, which is very British of them. I quite like that it doesn't matter how catastrophic the error is. After an AI is hallucinated and you tell it it's hallucinated, it's always very apologetic, right? Which is lovely. But I'm just not sure if that's going to cut it with the judge.
No, well, on that one, I actually read this week around the different personalities of kind of AI. I didn't dive too much into the story, but I heard there was numerous cases of personalities being developed and also in sync with the kind of whoever's prompting or engineering that. So if it's dealing with a British person, then the apology makes sense.
I don't know how to put this politely, but say in France, do you think it might be a little bit more direct?
I think so. Yeah, Dutch, French. I think we'd be a bit more direct. We'll probably get the job done quicker, to be honest, as well.
In all seriousness, I'm a bit frightened that the CPS have gone down this road, and who knows? Yeah, it's probably not the higher ups at the CPS that have been encouraging the use of AI for this application. I suspect it isn't. It looks like maybe it's a bit of a shadow IT issue. Yeah. And so again, it doesn't matter what's in your policy. It doesn't matter how you've set up your governance so much. If you haven't put some real effort into communicating to your staff how they should be using AI, how they should apply AI to these challenges, then this kind of stuff is going to keep cropping up.
Indeed, and we touched on shadow AI. I think that came quite high up last week in your ranking of biggest kind of business headaches, and this is probably a clear example. We don't know the ins and outs of it, but certainly sounds like this could be the case on that one. So this week we're going to be trying something new. We've dropped blind ranking for this week. It'll probably come back, but we thought of trying something a bit more fresh for this week. So we're going with something called Headline or Hype, Nick. And I'm going to give Nick 5 claims about AI jobs and the future of work that I've seen crop up in various articles and LinkedIn posts this week. So I tried to dig out 5 ambiguous or controversial statements that I've kind of picked up on. And I want Nick, as the kind of the AI expert, to give me some thoughts or muses on that. So statement 1, Nick, is every employee needs to become a prompt engineer. And like you said, we have touched on this, but I can't remember where I saw this, but I thought it was quite an interesting one.
Yeah, I think this feels like a headline from a couple of years ago. And the answer is no. Every employee does not need to become a prompt engineer. Models now understand conversational intent kind of inherently as the newer models, but the ability to sort of clearly articulate your goals and structure information is really important, and it always has been. So badly describing your required functionality to a software engineering team has always resulted in bad products, and that's still true. And if you're explaining something badly to AI, you're going to get a bad outcome. So this is about figuring out how important your query is. You know, is this a kind of tell me how to fix this cupboard and like showing it a picture of the cupboard, right?
Yeah.
In which case it's relatively low stakes. But even in that situation, right, I've got this particular problem actually where my cupboard door is hanging slightly off, right? And I've taken various pictures, lots of pictures, because you can give most of the models quite a few pictures of every different angle of this cupboard and like the fixings and things. And then that has allowed the AI to give me a more considered, more rounded answer than me just showing it that one picture of a cupboard door. If that's a work issue, right? If you're trying to figure out how to negotiate a contract and you want some AI help with that, by the way, you should take legal advice on top, right? You're going to want to give it every little bit of information in order to get the best quality answer. You're also going to want to know whether you can or you should give the AI the documentation you're about to give it. And so this is much more about being very considered around how you approach AI, how much detail you need to go into. Prompt engineering isn't a thing. Careful thought and consideration is the thing that you should be encouraging your employees to adopt as they move into this AI-driven world.
Definitely. I must hold my hands up. I've used AI recently on a couple of contracts. And I think it gives some kind of good pointers and things. But I think the good prompting really is just kind of clear communication and structured thinking, which I do worry about moving forward, because I think my take on AI a lot of the time is it's going to make people slightly lazy. I think it's going to inhibit thinking to a degree. I think it's like the professional version of kind of doom scrolling and almost like a brain rot, because it will take some of the, the creative thinking out of things. Whereas, 10, 20 years ago, we really had to think about things. I think people are relying on AI to do a lot of the thinking for you, which inevitably is going to make people lazy.
I think there is a way to use AI that encourages deeper thought and critical thinking, and that is having a proper conversation with AI and prompting the AI to challenge you.
Do people do that though?
No, right? But they should.
They should. Yeah.
For example, if you're trying to construct some legal argument, one of the things that I think most lawyers would probably tell you would be you want to understand the opposition's case, and the way you understand the opposition's case in this scenario is by asking the AI to pretend to be the person you're negotiating against or the person your legal case is against, and get them to be the top quality lawyer arguing with you. That then helps you build a much better argument, but also that's you engaging your intellect in a way that many uses of AI don't encourage.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for our listeners as well, there's lots of useful articles flying around about effective prompt engineering or prompts that can, give you better, efficiency in your approach to getting the output that's required from AI. So do have a scout around. There's some really interesting prompts.
I'm going to challenge that slightly, because I think although that can be useful, that's also another kind of aspect of lazy. That's another aspect of laziness, which means you're not engaging your intellect.
True.
So kind of like constructing your own prompts is, even though there are pre-existing ones, it just helps you engage with the problem yourself as well as engaging AI with the problem.
Okay, well, I agree and disagree. I think getting some good examples of some prompts will educate people and make them understand how this works a bit better. I saw an Anthropic workshop the other day. I think I just saw it on Twitter. Someone posted it, and it was how to really get the most out of it. And there was some really interesting. It was directly from Anthropic, and it was some really interesting takes on prompts.
That's fair, Chris. I'll give you that.
Yeah. Thank you. Next one, and we touched on this last week, is AI will remove most junior roles.
Yeah.
My take on this is I think it will evolve junior roles. We touched on it last week. I think we got a really interesting comment around the junior roles becoming more about kind of QA and that making them more effective, more prone to picking up errors, around output. So I think the junior roles are just going to change from kind of admin role-based tasks to kind of refereeing AI in a sense.
I think that's a really good take. When it says AI will remove most junior roles, I agree. I think it will change them significantly. That's probably true, but I think removes most assumes that everything a junior person does is this sort of structured, repeatable bit. Mm-hmm. In my experience, a significant portion of what makes a good junior person in your team is their judgment and their questions, because they're coming from a different perspective, right? And if you have people who have a willingness to tell you when something looks wrong or what their take is on it, it actually really helps. So maybe what we ask of junior people is more critical thinking, more challenge, and less moving data around on an Excel spreadsheet.
Definitely. Next one, companies need a chief AI officer.
No, it's silly. Companies need their existing leadership to actually understand what AI is and isn't capable of. Creating a new C-suite title so everyone else can stop thinking about it is sort of a familiar pattern.
Yes, inevitable almost.
Yeah, what's worse is that it silos something that shouldn't be in a silo. For a start, if you're in any sort of IT or technology role, you're going to be deeply involved in AI, or at least you should be. So how does that split out into your CIO and chief AI officer roles? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Mm-hmm. And it's these silos that have traditionally created a lot of problems. We've done it with digital, we've done it with data, and it rarely ends well. Personally, I've spent a couple of decades trying to correct issues caused by changes like this. So I think not only is it a bit silly, I think it's actually a bad move. I think it causes more problems than it solves.
So we're not going to see in your LinkedIn title anytime soon, in that little snippet, Chief AI Officer.
I mean, if I think it'll get me a better job, then
Yeah. And I think it's the case on this one is AI touches too many areas to kind of sit entirely within one isolated function. On the flip side, looking at it maybe positively, I think if a Chief AI Officer were to come in, they could help, coordinate the overall agenda. But certainly they can't own adoption alone.
Yeah, that feels like not a chief AI officer. I feel like you need someone at executive level that takes a strategic view of technology. And within that, a big chunk of that is AI. Now, whether that person is a CTO, CIO, whatever it is, that person might want to bring someone in whose job is really around AI policy, AI governance, maybe around culture and adoption. Having that additional help, I think, is really useful. But it's your senior technologist's job to address the kind of strategic implications of AI.
Next one up is AI agents will replace software subscription.
No, unfortunately, this would be actually lovely if it was true. But in my experience, you need to sign up to a bunch more subscriptions so your AI agents can use their APIs and MCP servers. We'll probably end up paying for the agent, the model it runs on, the tool it connects to, and the premium tier that gives it slightly better manners. So unfortunately, the subscription isn't going anywhere. It's just going to be hard to explain to your finance team why you've got 25 of them.
Will software companies resist agents that make kind of traditional seat-based pricing less profitable?
I think they might try to. I just don't think they'll have a lot of agency over it. I think, so we're talking about SaaS here. SaaS companies are going to have to adapt really quickly because people will be able to build their own versions of that SaaS software that are kind of more bespoke, but more importantly, they'll be able to adapt to move more quickly than most of these SaaS companies. So SaaS has to be really careful about, it's got to try to retain its current profit margins, but also avoid being disrupted, which is probably why their share prices are all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, the markets at the moment are crazy, up and down. Statement number 5 and our final one of the week, probably my favourite because it deserves to be a headline in my opinion. Human skills will become more valuable, not less.
So I've declared almost all of these headlines BS, but this is the one that I agree with the caveat that it's the right human skills. I mean, human skills are, I don't know, folding a jumper. Okay, that's a human skill. It's a human skill that my other half tells me that I don't have, but I understand that other people do have it. That is a skill that is likely at some point in the next couple of decades to be not a human skill anymore. A robot will be able to do that. Thank God, right?
Indeed.
So the right human skills, that's important. And what are the right human skills? Judgment, ethics, communication, the ability to notice when something's confidently wrong, like an AI will tell you. Those skills, I think, were already undervalued before AI arrived, and they're the ones that we'll suddenly care about, I think. So it's either encouraging or deeply ironic, depending on how long you've been saying it.
Yeah, and I think as AI becomes better at producing content and analysing information and completing those routine tasks, the more valuable human contribution may increasingly come from judgment, empathy, although Meta don't seem to have got that one quite nailed, allegedly. We talk about those water cooler moments in business, and I've not actually heard that one in a while. It was one of those phrases that kept cropping up a while back, but those sparks of innovation that just come from that, the creative element of humans in the workplace, you can probably never replace that.
I agree. I think the thing I always come back to is your customers are always human. Either your B2C and your customers are definitely human. Your B2B and your customers are human. I mean, I'm not ruling out that there is a kind of B2A scenario in which all of your customers are AI agents. That might be a thing that happens. But for the time being, mostly your customers are mostly human. And you need humans in order to understand them, in order to deliver products that work for them. AI can help a lot, but that's really important in terms of keeping in your head who your products are for and knowing that only humans really know what humans want and need.
Spot on. And that brings us to the end of episode 4. This week we focused on people and culture side of enterprise AI, and hopefully we've covered some useful bits of information there. We've looked at allegations that AI-assisted measures influence workplace decisions at Meta, discussed the UK financial services industry's commitment to upskilling its workforce. We've seen evidence that AI is moving beyond specialist technology jobs and into various other functions within the business. For me, the theme connecting all three stories is trust. Do employees trust how AI is being used? Do they trust leaders to invest in their development? If you've enjoyed this episode, please do follow, subscribe wherever you're listening. Leave a comment if there's a story that you want us to discuss or a LinkedIn article you want to call out. Do pop it in the comments and share the podcast with someone who's currently being asked to embrace AI without being given any training, guidance, or clue what that actually means. Nick, thank you as always.
Absolute pleasure.
We'll be back next time with more news, another bad robot, and possibly a new segment, depending on whether headline or hype survives its probation period. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.